Last time I went live, or was it the time before last? I forgot to turn my mic on. So like there was a whole thing of no audio going in. Morning, Janet Zabo. You probably won't hear this because there's that non-skippable video ad at the beginning. I've just decided for monetization purposes, I make about $10 or $20 a month on YouTube. Not very much money, but I'm not going to say no to it. And part of that is I don't like to have the skippable ads like that you get stuck on when your hands are busy. That's one. And then like the midstream, if you just let them put videos anywhere midstream, you did hear it. Cool. They end up like automatically putting it every 80 seconds or something. Sometimes it's really terrible. And I always have to go back and undo that. So if you get one of my videos and it has that and you're like, man, it's been a while, definitely reach out to me because sometimes I forget. But yeah, Janet has YouTube Premium, no ads. So she actually heard me talk about her. Anyway, guys, on the live stream, as usual, we're going to be doing a recording of the Homestead Happening podcast, followed by Q&A. I got a bunch of questions via email this time, so we'll be covering some of those. There's some pretty fun ones. I'll bring any holler neighbors on who want to come on for the Q&A section. Tactical is going to talk to us about making vinegar, because that's one of the questions is how to make vinegar. And it's going to be fun. If you have questions for the Q&A show as we're going through the Homestead Happening update, you can enter them in all caps, first couple letters. I'll star them for later. And then we'll handle those in the Q&A section. Of course, today's a Homestead Happenings update. And one of my, like, later in the show, the F-bomb's going to come out in the Q&A section. So just know that it's not going to come out during the recording of the podcast, but it will come out in the Q&A because I'm playing some audio from somebody else and it has an F-bomb in it. So I'll give you a heads up on that if you don't want to hear that word. It's, I think, a 3-minute video or so that we'll be playing later in the show. So we're all here and we're ready to go, right? So I'll do 5-second pause. I will record the Homestead Happenings. Then I'll do a 5-second pause and we'll go into the Q&A and have a good time. I'll stay here as long as you have questions. With that, let's get this podcast done. Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Friday, October 14th, 2022. This is episode 635 of Living Free in Tennessee, and we're in week 2 of 5 podcast episodes a week, which is super exciting for me. And that happens in part because this episode we record live, I take questions, and the questions turn into a second episode on Saturday. And then, of course, we have the interview show on Sunday. I'm wearing my Self-Reliance Festival t-shirt. It's up to you today. And it's also sweater season. So I'm in this beautiful hand-knit sweater that Mama Sauce made me that's super cozy because my house is about 68 degrees. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's like to heat with wood later in the show, just as we go through our segments today. But I'm also going to talk about, so the first 5 sheep have gone to butcher. I decided not to process them myself for time reasons, which means I'm paying somebody else to do it. And he's a great guy. He's actually, because he's a craft butcher, I can get all the bones back by telling him I want all the bones back. And they keep track of which animals are mine. I went to his operation, walked through it, and I'm kind of excited about that because he's small enough of an operation that we can keep track of that. Of course, we also are selling 3 of these online at livingfreeintennessee.com. If you want to get a half or a whole animal, I'll sell you the animal. You pay him directly, and it's your animal, and then you get the meat. So we're also going to talk about what the finances look like after all the dust has settled from the original investment in June to processing to today. We're going to talk about what the livestock's doing around here in the fall, growing food, maybe the discussion of a new segment for winter for Homestead Happenings, just because one of the segments I have doesn't really make sense in the winter. Deborah, welcome. New to the podcast. Woohoo, we have new podcast people. Help Deborah connect all the dots. Anyway, if you want to email me, a question for the Q&A show or anything about this show, you can do it. Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com, NICOLE at livingfreeintennessee.com, or go over to livingfreeintennessee.com, click on contact. Those emails go to me. With Self-Reliance Festival behind me, I'm getting better at getting back to people on emails, and it's kind of fun to add your questions to the Q&A segment of this show, even if you can't like hop on YouTube in the morning, in the middle of your workday, if you are a working person who works during the workday. Next segment is our sponsor of the day. I wanted to thank today's show sponsor, which is freesteading.com. Don't know what freesteading.com is? Well, you should if you are into homesteading, off-grid living, or self-reliance. It is a whole new community. Think like Facebook style, MeWe style community, only it's kind of loosely organized around freedom of speech, although not freedom to abuse people, and being able to connect with each other really. So they've set up a marketplace or a community rather, where you can post things just like you would on Facebook, share pictures, share videos, talk to each other. They have communities where you can just kind of like groups on Facebook where you can talk back and forth. And I think they're going to be adding a layer of like sort of marketplace, which is kind of nice because anybody who's on Facebook knows if you need to sell livestock, you're not allowed to. Well, this is freesteading.com. You're allowed to. And so when I reached out to Tag of Freesteading, have a great energy together. Yes, Tag and B do. When I reached out to Tag and said, what about the sponsorship here? We'll highlight you. He was all over it. I did donate it to him. So this is a free sponsorship I've given them because I believe in this one so much. So they'll be a Friday sponsor of the show for the next 6 months. I'm excited to have them on board. I'm excited to highlight their system. And if you want to find me on freesteading.com, I've got my profile set up. I'm Nicole Sauce there. We're working on getting the Living Free in Tennessee community up and running. Definitely check it out. What I've noticed is the people I'm meeting there are all doers. And that's great because I love talking to doers and they're homesteaders, and they are excited about the platform as well. Definitely check that out. First segment of today's show, though, is featured Forage. This is where we talk about what we're finding out on the land. And as we go into winter, we will find less and less, and then maybe nothing. There's always something, though. And this is what happens. Energy from plants that came out for the spring and summer to do their plant thing has gone down into the roots, or it's in the process of going down into the roots. And that means that when we forage in the winter, we look for roots unless it's something that fruits in the winter, like wintergreen. So right now what I'm finding are, well, I'm not really digging them up, but like Jerusalem artichokes and those sorts of things are developing their tubers. We've had the first frost, so probably we're about to the point where I can dig those up and actually eat them. I like to give them a little bit more time than now. Ground nuts are coming out now. Actual nuts falling off the tree. So we've got black walnuts, we have chestnuts, we have hickory nuts, we have all of these things coming off the trees. If you pick them up before they sit around too long, you don't get a lot of wormies in them, although you still get some wormies in them if you don't use pesticides. And then it's time to harvest. So last week I talked about winter is coming, the first frost is coming. We're doing all this antifreeze stuff, had my first fire, like all of that. And frost sensitive plants are done. Well, they're not quite done here. We had a light frost, like the banana tree made it through that, and some other things. I still have some mint. I still have comfrey. There's still some stuff in the yard that does not like to get too cold. We had that frost and then it warmed up again. We got some rain. That made some plants happy. And that means we still have another wave of harvest we can do. Last week, I did like all of the harvesting in the garden and all that stuff just because that frost was coming. And so now I'm getting like a 2.0 frost is coming harvest. So we'll be grabbing the comfrey and other frost sensitive plants to the degree that we can, and that we can dry them and store them. Like if I harvested all the comfrey on the property, I don't really need to. I can chop and drop it though, because it's great for adding nutrient back into the soil. That's what you do with comfrey. Like you can take the leaves from the comfrey plant, put them up in your garden, and that's kind of nice. I just compost them in place. I don't make Other people make compost tea and other things, or throw them in their compost piles. I'll just chop and drop them and put them around the plants. I do that around my tomatoes. Tomatoes love that. That's in the summer. But right now we've definitely got some comfrey leaves that we can use for the gardening. Next segment is livestock. This is where we talk about what's up with the livestock on the homestead. And as many of y'all know, we took 5 sheep to slaughter because I said it at the beginning of the show. Ha! And I didn't know how loading was going to go. So what we had were 8 male sheep, and 5 of them are going to butcher because a male animal ends up being food on the homestead most of the time. Your females are reproductive. You have a male who has a specific purpose, and then the rest of them become meat. And with that many male sheep going into winter and not being able to grow grass in winter and needing to feed hay, it is time to make the decision. Plus they're 6 to 9 months old right now. So it's time. And we had them out on pasture about 1/10 of a mile from here on a property next door we're using for that. Thank goodness, because we would have totally not had enough grass here this year without the rain. And I was like, how's this going to go? So Tactical brought them, because they were way up the hill, brought them down near the barn to a paddock near the barn, and then set up some cattle panels that could be opened and closed into a bay area. And then we parked the livestock trailer on the other side of the bay and blocked that off with cattle panels so they could go into the trailer, but not out of the bay. And then drove them into the bay, all of them, and then started letting out the 3 we wanted to keep. And it took us 2 times to get that done. So we accidentally let somebody out who didn't need to be let out and had to drive them back in and then drive them back out. Not all of them, but the ones who, got out along with everybody else who were keeping. And so that was relatively painless. And when they were in the bay, they were just like climbing into the livestock trailer or not. And so I was like, well, that's great. They're not afraid of it. So we decided not to load them the night before we left, because we were leaving at 6:30 in the morning to go to the processor to get our appointment at the processor. And we next morning got down there at 6 so that, if something went wrong, we had a half-hour cushion. We didn't get out of there until 6:40 or 6:50. So in the morning, it was still dark. And apparently livestock trailers, when they're dark, are scary. So we had to drive them into that, but it went okay. I mean, it didn't go that badly. And we drove to the processor, and he was super cool. As I said, I got to see his whole facility, and he, as far as going through. So one of my complaints with some of the larger USDA processors in Tennessee, one in particular, is they say, what cuts do you want? And you say, I want these cuts, and I want to keep all the organs and all the bones. And you'll get back liver and a couple of bones. And I'll say, what happens to the rest of the organs and bones? Oh, you have to list each organ that you want. So if you want the heart, you have to list the heart. If you want the tongue, you have to list the tongue. And so apparently all organs means liver. And they're keeping that and doing something with it, dog food or something. I don't know. They're reselling it. And they also ended up not saving the bones. They saved some soup bones, but not all the bones. And while I understand it might not be easy to like get a skull freed up from all the skin and stuff, and I'm cool with that, I'm like, I don't have to have the feet, but like the leg bones make really good stew. So I want the bones, right? And they just don't, it's not their process. And the other problem I've had with them is they lose things. So you go pick up your animal, you go home with 4 bags, and you're like, I don't have any ribs. And usually there are ribs on every animal. And they're like, oh yeah, we found this other bag. We lost it. Can you drive? Well, 4 hours each way. Can I drive back and get 1 bag of meat that's like 10 pounds? Stops become worth it. So I was actually super stoked with this processor. He's in Dunlap, Tennessee. And he's a smaller operation. He had 5 or 6 people working there, and they were already into processing as we drove away. Like, it was happening fast. So that's pretty cool. Loading went well. The drive went slowly but well. I was about 10 minutes late, I think, to my appointment, which I feel bad about, but next time I'll know better that we start at 5:30 loading them if we have an 8 a.m. appointment. We have an issue where the livestock dog Max does not like the Eversoles because when they were taking care of him, they were petting him and he got too close. Like they were on one side of the electric fence and he was on the other, and he got shocked and he associated that with them. So now he thinks they bite. And so we're going to start working on with treats and things, getting them reassociated with him. The lesson there is never pet animals over an electric fence. Come into the fence with them, because if they do get shocked and they associate it with you, that's a problem. I did that to the pig once. I felt really bad. She didn't talk to me for the rest of the day, but she did get over it. But yeah, so Max has held a grudge longer than I've seen anything hold a grudge over that one. And I think it's going to take treats and pets and lots of things to get him over that. And it's important that happen because they are helping us, as backstop on the animals. And if they can't feed the dog because the dog's scared of them, that's a problem, right? So we'll start working on that. We were kind of talking about that last night. We have one ewe looking close to giving birth. So like she looks like she might be dropping milk. She's fat, but we don't know because we've never birthed sheep before. I've seen goats right before they give birth. And I assisted in a goat birth, but we've never done it with sheep. We are now at October 14th. They were due on October 1st. So we're really late. I don't know what that means. And it could be at the end of it that she's fat. So I'll know by the end of the month. If we don't have sheep, we're probably going to put the sheep with the boys and the girls with the boys and just assume they're not pregnant and go on with life. I didn't really want to bring a veterinarian out to do an ultrasound. So we're just doing the best we can with that. So we'll let you know if we have babies. There will totally be pictures of cute baby sheep up online. It's time to breed the rabbits again. It's been cool enough that the sperm count of the males will be up. We were up so hot this summer that was just like reproduction did not happen. It was just way too hot for them. The ducks are still in jail. We're getting one egg. We got one egg 2 days ago. And I said, is it molting? Like, what is it? Tactical says he thinks it might be rats. So we've been fighting rats all year, as I talked about. And they have been in the duck coop and rats will eat eggs. So we're going to be working some more on the rat project. I think he calls it the rat superhighway, where he's going to try to put some electrical fencing in and see if that reduces the rodents in there. There's going to be a big reset in the duck coop over the winter, I'm pretty sure, as a result of this. And I've never had rodent problems in my coop in 15 years until this year. And I think it's because Tigger is 15 years old and he's a good mouser, and he's a less good mouser now. He's starting to look like a geriatric cat. And I think what I have is not a rat problem, but a cat problem, or a lack of cat problem. And since there are 4 cats on my property, I'm not super keen to bring more cats in at this hot minute. So we're going to have to work that out. I also know that other homesteaders in Tennessee have had enormous rodent problems this particular year. It's also been the year of the rat, like literally the year of the rat for everybody. So we're not alone. And I always, people always ask me, how do you deal with rodents? I'm like, I don't have to. I have a cat. Now I have to. And we've been using bait that doesn't pass on to larger animals if they eat the rats. We've been using traps where they drown. We've been scowling at them. The cats have caught a good number of rodents this year. It is just not enough. And hopefully it's a really cold winter and all the baby rats die. I do also want to pull everything out of the building that coop is attached to and really look at like what we can do with that building and how we have the workshop laid out. I'm not going to trick myself into thinking that's really going to happen though. So we will see. I've got the pigs for sale. So Lady Pig and Lady Pig and LB are for sale. I haven't been marketing them very hard because a couple people in the community reached out about maybe wanting them. She's an Idaho pasture pig, which means she can live off of forage. Do need to augment her food, but she knows how to eat grass and forage. She loves foraging through the woods. She's a great pig. She's a great mom. So I could bring her to the processor and we will get a lot of meat if I do that. I probably emotionally would not be super stoked to shoot her and process her myself. If I had to make myself do it, I could, but I don't have to make myself do it. So if we decide to process her, it will be taking her to the processor. LB is a stud pig, so he still has his testicles, which means you probably don't want to process him because you'll get the taint in the meat, probably. Bleh. So, but he's a good breeder, and they make a good breeding pair. If you're interested in that, reach out to me. If not, I am going to start marketing them more aggressively because they need to go somewhere where pigs need to be, and pigs do not need to be here because we're doing sheep. Speaking of which, I do have lamb meat for sale. That's at livingfreeintennessee.com. If you can't find it, just email me. I'm selling them by the half and the whole. I've got 2 left to sell. Well, I have 1.5 left to sell. And if you're interested, you can check that out. The average per pound meat price, I think, will be about $12 a pound, which probably sounds really expensive. We are going to go over sheep finances during the finance section of today's show, just so you can see what it's really cost us. Because part of homesteading is track what it really costs you, because you need to know if you have an expensive hobby, if you're replacing things. Like my priorities here are first and foremost the quality of life and the quality of food. And so that means that I put more into my duck eggs than if I just bought them at the store. It's important to know you're doing that though, right? And, other people are better at, gleaning things to feed their animals with than I am. And I'm not really into spending a lot of time. It takes me 45 minutes to drive to town. So getting restaurant surplus to feed my animals means 45 minutes each way. That's an hour and a half. It's an hour and a half for free food, but an hour and a half in the middle of the day, once or twice a week, is not something I personally have. And plus you talk to people. So it's really going to take, 2 hours by the time you're done with it. So we trade that off for buying feed from really good sources. And I'll talk about that when we get to the community section too, because we found a new source. Well, somebody else in the community found a new source for us, which is pretty darn cool. Next segment is Grow. This is where we talk about what we're growing on the land. And this is the segment. I'm just putting this question out to y'all. I've been doing the Grow segment all summer long. And right now, we're not going to be growing much anymore. We're transitioning out of grow season here. I don't do a lot of outdoor winter grow stuff. I have one or 2 more weeks of stuff to talk about, and then we're done. So what would make a good replacement for this segment? I'm just curious because I want to share our experiences on this weekly update on the homestead for y'all who have homesteads or want to have homesteads or just interested in homesteading. And grow does not make sense in the winter on the homestead, at least not here. In Florida, it totally makes sense because that's their growing season. But here, not so much. Anyway, what we're doing right now are putting all the garden beds to sleep. It's going slower than I would like it to because I have not, since Self-Reliance Festival, had a whole day where I could just be outside working on stuff. Tactical also has not because of the water redo project, which is taking our stuff, kind of off. So I'm never going off grid all the way unless I have to because I'm on grid already. So it doesn't make sense. But it does make sense to add resilience in by being less dependent on the grid. And one step we're taking this year, because we're putting in the food forest at the end of the month in the food forest class, is also changing how the water gets to my house. Because right now I pump the water from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill with electricity to get water. Now it's really cool. I have wonderful spring water at the bottom of the hill. The house is halfway up the hill. It's a big hill. That takes electricity. When the power goes out, my water stops working. That's normal for anybody with a well system, unless you're cool like Tag and have your whole solar array. My friends who are off-grid on solar, they're like, we don't even know when the power goes out because it doesn't go out at our house unless something breaks. So we decided to put a storage tank above elevation above my house to feed the house. Not enough to give me water pressure, like that would take a tower, but enough so when the water system is not working because power goes out, I can still get water to the house at a trickle to wash my hands and refill toilets, which is great. I have outhouses, like it's not, I have a backup system if I can't flush, but it's kind of nice not to have to pour the buckets to flush the toilet. In addition, I can then tie in a pump at the bottom of the hill that is fed by solar to slowly refill the tank at the top of the hill and hopefully use less electricity in order to have less of a power bill. And so that's going to be the next thing is like, do I put a panel system? Do I just get they make solar pumps that have the panels included? Like how we're going to do that at the bottom of the hill, we get less sun. What do I do with the pump on those times of year where it's overcast for like 2 straight weeks and snowy and we're not getting enough, so there's lots of considerations about this, but it's just one more step towards more resilience in my homestead. And that is almost all done as part of that. But that means that Tactical was out with the backhoe guy working on the pipes the whole time this week. And it took days. And sourcing the pipes was pretty funny. I had to go to 4 stores to get enough PEX to run a 300-foot run. And they didn't have any 1,000-foot rolls. They just had 100-foot rolls. In order to get enough PEX to do this, I had to go to 4 stores. And that's because I thought I needed 300 feet of pipe, and then I needed another 100 feet of pipe. And by that time, Lebanon was out, Cookeville was out, and that's Lebanon, 2 stores in Lebanon, Lowe's and Home Depot. Lowe's in Cookeville was out. And so we had to go to McMinnville. Luckily, it was on our way home from the sheep, so it was only like a 15-minute thing addition to the whole trip. But it's dang difficult to source some things right now, guys. And that was like I had spent a week working on just finding the pipe, and that's part of why we didn't do this part during the workshop, because I didn't want students standing around watching us dig for a day. Like that doesn't do a lot of good. So I thought, well, we can be like, we dug the ditch, here it is. Now, as part of that, I totally put in a couple of extra lines for geothermal, and I have in mind to add geothermal cooling and heating to my house. Maybe next year, maybe the year after, we'll see. But while the ditch was open, running the lines made sense to move the water because I have 55-degree water at the bottom of my hill, which is kind of cool. So I can do an open system. Tactical and I were talking today about what if we make it a closed system. I just don't know what will happen. So we'll figure that all out, and I will totally share as we go. I've always wanted a geothermal system here. I use window cooling for cooling. Heating's actually not an issue, but cooling is an issue here, and then humidity is an issue in my house. I'm built into the side of a hill, which is great for insulation. Not so great for not being super humid and growing mold in the summer. So that is Tennessee. As far as what we're growing, which is the segment I'm supposed to be talking about, Nicole goes off on a tangent again. I have lettuce in the outdoor aquaponics system as well as brassicas. I have the brassicas because I went back to the land festival and somebody had planted too many cauliflower in her garden, and she brought me a whole bunch of plants. So thank you for those plants. They're doing great. I was at Lowe's getting trees and shrubs for my food forest, and I saw 1 tray of lettuce because I didn't start my own lettuce like I usually do because it was too busy and I wasn't going to do it successfully if I tried. So I bought that tray of lettuce for $12 and I put that tray of lettuce. So now I have lettuce too. Just being upfront about how I got the lettuce. I did not start that from seed. I'm really hoping to find somebody in the community next year who wants to do fall garden starts so that I can give them money to start the plants, because I think pretty much every August, September, I run into this time crunch where there's lots of events going on. People have asked me to speak. We're running around, and I sacrifice the seedling part of homesteading to do these other things, which are all part of the ecosystem we work in. If we think about what I talk about on Underground Networking, though, the solution to my problem isn't make more time or change my priorities. It's find somebody who makes that time and likes to start the seedlings. So if you're that person, definitely reach out to me, because while I will start my seedlings for the spring, because I do every time, I might even buy some for the spring, depending on what you start. I definitely in the fall basically never get around to. I've only like one time in 15 years gotten around to starting my seedlings in the fall. I just talk about it and then I don't do it. Sometimes we just have to be honest with ourselves about what we're really going to accomplish. And I know I'm not going to accomplish that because I have other priorities. I have not set up the indoor lettuce growing operation. I do have them out in the aquaponics system. I have a microclimate under Taj Mahal where things have not frozen. Like I still have tomatoes going out there. I'm going to take those out this weekend. But it's kind of cool because I'm getting lettuce off the aquaponics system that's in a microclimate under Taj Mahal. It's a little bit warmer. That's why I haven't started it. And again, back to priorities and what the timeline is for the next 4 weeks. I'm not going to start it until after Jack's workshop, which means after November 15th. And then it'll be 6 weeks before I get my first head of lettuce. And that's fine. And during that time, it's Christmas coffee rush. So I may decide to put it off till Christmas break because I take that week off between Christmas and New Year's. I understand there will be a community event on New Year's Day. I'm super excited about that. But if I'm roasting coffee all the time and not taking care of plants, starting the plants doesn't help. It takes me half an hour to an hour a week to maintain my indoor lettuce grow operation. It takes me 2 hours to set it up the first time, so it's not a huge time investment. Pretty sure I can get that done in mid-November, but we will see. If I have a lot of corporate orders and a lot of other orders, the orders go out first because I'm trying to ship people's coffee in time for Christmas. And then, as I said, adjusting this section, I have a couple of, thanks guys in the comments for all of your suggestions. So we've got an off-season prep section suggested instead of grow. Replace grow with planning your spring planting. That's a good one. What's in the crock pot this week? That's a good one. Grow personal edition. What new skills am I learning? Maybe do a network share session. So lots of ideas. Keep the ideas coming. I am going to replace the grow segment with something while we're not growing because, hearing that I'm growing lettuce inside every week after week doesn't help you once I get the lettuce system up and running. Or I was outside and nothing's growing, guys. It's all dormant. I trimmed the trees that were dormant. Like that's about all I can talk about. Right? Okay. Speaking of community, the next segment is the Holler Neighbor community. And if Holler Neighbors are listening, I sent the link out on Telegram to join the StreamYard. If you wanted another way, you better jump into YouTube comments and let me know because I can send it another way. But I added you who were not in the Telegram channel that's for Holler Neighbors only to the Telegram channel if I knew who you were on Telegram. That's for the Eversouls, basically. I don't know if they're jumping in today. They have day jobs. I know Tactical is going to jump in today because he has a question for him in the Q&A section. Okay, so here's what's up in the Holler Neighbors community. First of all, I got to go see Liz and Trish, who those of you who are in our sort of our live network know who they are, bought a property, I don't know, 25, 35 minutes from here, and maybe 45. And I never got out to see it. Like they've owned this thing for months. And everybody else in the holler has seen this property. I have not seen this property because the one day I had free to go see it, it became not free. So they had people out there. I was going to go check it out. I have an employee at Holler Roast Coffee who comes in and helps. Said employee got COVID, did not come in and help, which meant I was doing 2 jobs that day. And by the time I got done with everything, it was like 4 p.m. before I could leave to go out there. They'd already done everything. We're heading to town to go out to eat. I had choir that night, didn't go. So I finally got to go see it, which was super cool. And it's a beautiful property, beautiful view. I can totally see why they chose that. And I'm stoked about that. So that was one thing, just being able to be in person at somebody's property that I've said I wanted to go see for so long was really nice. What's happening in the Holler Neighbor community is I'm pretty much borrowing everything I can from the Eversouls on an ongoing basis. So I bought a meat slicer off of an auction house. Oh gosh, I guess almost a year ago, and it's like a deli commercial one, and it supposedly worked, and I got it home and it did not work. And so we had the hand sliced bacon at my spring workshop because I didn't have a meat slicer. I gave my other one away, and it's just been sitting there in Tactical's house being big and heavy and in his way ever since then. So I was like, hey, go to YouTube and figure out what's up, because I feel like it's because there's a safety feature that keeps you from cutting your fingers off on it that is somehow tripped and not untripping. And if we just did a thorough once over, we could probably repair it. Sometimes when we are dealing with clutter, we need to admit when we're not going to fix things that we probably should fix, but there's a list of 20 things that need to be fixed, right? This is one of those things. I was like, I'm just going to buy a meat slicer. And then I looked at the price of meat slicers and I was like, maybe I'll look at this other meat slicer. I've already got $200 into this other meat slicer. I'll look at it and see if I can fix it. So Tactical, bring this up. It's like 60 pounds. He's, suffering as he walks up the hill under this meat slicer. And he does, and he gets it in there. We get it in my kitchen. I'm looking at it, and there's a piece broken off, and there's some other stuff going on. And I turn it on, and the motor is activating, but it's not turning the thing, which tells me that safety is probably the issue, or the motor's seized up. I don't know. I spent about an hour on it. And at the end of it, I decided that an hour of my time, if I'm billing a client, is $75 to $100. That's what I usually bill when we're doing coaching. And that I just spent another $75 to $100 on this thing. And now it's a $275 not working stupid meat slicer. And I posted it on Facebook Marketplace for $50, and I would take $20 for it. In fact, I'm putting it at the metal scrapper. If it's not gone in a week, it's going in the scrap pile and gone, because I'm not going to fix it. And that is what it is. And then I was like, but I have bacon I need to slice, because it finally got cold enough to cold smoke the bacon. So we've cold smoked the bacon this week. That I'd already cured it. Like I do the curing method I do is with just salt. So it's a dry cure method, but I put it in a vacuum sealed bag and like massage it, put it in the fridge. We cure it for 2 weeks. And then I froze it because I wanted to smoke it, cold smoke it. So I hickory smoked the bacon this week when we had the freezing night, so it would not get warm in the smoker, and then have it back in the fridge ready to slice. And so I sent a message out to the Eversoles, and I'm like, do you have a meat slicer? Turns out they did. And so we got that meat slicer here, and I also bought one. I also have one on the way just for future meat slicing futures. But that's just because it's an essential part of what we do here. If you don't have a meat slicer, you can use a very sharp knife to slice bacon. But when you are slicing 80 pounds of bacon, like that's worth driving to Chef Brett's and using his. That's how much it is, because it's a lot of hand slicing. So that's eventually it will arrive. I found a good one. And between now and then, thank you to the Eversoles for letting me use their stuff. We have sort of started doing Holler Neighbor dinners. It's not formalized. The week before Self-Reliance Festival, Eversoles had Tactical, Mama Sauce, Nighthawk, and I over to their place, and me. That's the grammatically correct way to say that. And it was great because that week was super busy, and I was not ready to cook that night. I would have probably just had Chinese food from the takeout place in town. And we returned the favor last night, had tacos, stayed up talking until about 9:30. That was really fun. This week, as the water pipes were open, the ditch was open for that. I was like, wait a minute. I wonder if Eversoles have a drone. Hey, do you got a drone? And Steve was like, yeah. I was like, hey, can you get a picture of my property while this ditch is open so that future owners know where the water lines are? He was like, yeah. And he came over and did that. And they've been there for emergency sheep assistance. So it's been really great. I was online today, and Evan Dixon has launched a business. Evan Dixon was at Self-Reliance Festival doing ham radio things. And I bring this up in the community section of today's show because a lot of what happens in the community is we get together, new ideas form and new businesses form. And I was super excited to see he has launched officially his business. You can check that out at Facebook. Just go find Self-Reliance Festival there and you will find his business. Hopefully he gets on freesteading.com with his business and sets up a community. Evan, I hope you're listening to this. If he's not, guys, tell him freesteading.com. It's free and free speech and people interested in the things we're interested in. So that's kind of cool. And then Trisha, whose house I was out at, found a new source for feed in Kentucky. So right now we drive pretty much darn near all the way to special operations equipment. We drive about 2.5, 3 hours to buy feed at a really good feed source in Tennessee called MPS Farms. And MPS Farms has non-soy feed, which is what I'm looking for. I believe it's organic and GMO free. I care less about that and a lot more about no soy going into my body for a lot of reasons. One of which is I'm allergic to it. So I'd make a terrible vegan. Terrible vegan. I can't eat anything vegan unless it's just like vegetables and nothing else. And not soybean vegetables. Certainly not soy-based products. I can get away with some wheat gluten, but I get wheat meat too. So like it's like the double impact of wheat and soy is an issue for me. I can eat corn. Now you guys know way more about Nicole Sauce than you ever wanted to, right? Anyway, there's a source in Kentucky that if you buy 2,000 pounds at a time is way more reasonable. And they deliver to Sparta, which is close to me. If you get 2,000 pounds at a time. 2,000 pounds is a lot of feed. I think it's a lot of feed. But Trisha's like, Nicole, I have chickens. You have ducks. Other people around us have chickens or ducks. Maybe we could pool our resources and get 2,000 pounds, have it delivered to my house because she has a pretty darn cool barn. And then we just divide it up and we all save a little money and you don't have to drive across the state. Tactical was like, even if it costs more money, I will buy that just to not have to drive across the state. And so I think we're going to put together sort of a feed co-op, not officially, but, a networked feed co-op. And I tell you this because where do you live? What are your food sources for things? Can you do something similar? If you know 3 to 5 people around you who have similar priority in the kind of feed you want, and you find a source that will deliver near you, or you take the trek and you just go get a giant trailer load, you've got a problem solved that a lot of us have in the homesteading world where we want high quality feed, but the only stores near us are Farmers Co-op and Tractor Supply, which if you have to buy feed there, right? It's like better than not raising your own animals, but there are also smaller operators, and 2,000 pounds of feed is not as much as you think. A bag's 50 pounds. Some people go through a bag a month. Some people go through a bag a week. Some people go through 5 bags a week. It just depends. But if you can pool your resources on that and store it, you've got your own co-op going. Next thing you know, we're all saving money, helping each other, and have feed stability for our animals, which is an issue. Have you ever had that issue where you're like, so when I was first raising chickens, it was in the spring. I got them in the spring from McMurray Hatchery. I get them all set up, and I have this like tiny little bag of food that's maybe 5 pounds. It's not very much feed. And at the beginning, chicks don't eat very much. So they're eating their layer crumble. It's getting low, and I go to Tractor Supply to get more layer crumble, and they were out. That was 15 years ago. They were out. Now, with supply chain issues, they could be out for weeks. And I quickly learned when you raise chicks and you're going to buy commercial feed, you buy all the feed you need for the life of the chicks. And then if there's extra, you feed it to your layer ducks. That was because of that first year. It's worse now. So having a good source is great. I mean, MPS Farms is also great. So I'm not saying don't use them. I'm saying do use them if you're close to them. But if you can find a solution like mine where you get the feed across the state without, investing over half a day in driving, that's great. And I know like Ken Esch from our community, when he goes to MPS Farms, because he drives from Kentucky to get feed, he'll reach out to me and be like, hey, you need any feed? Because I'm driving right by your house. And I usually say yes if I do, because that saves us the drive. That's how the community works. Next segment is infrastructure. This is where we talk about what we're building in the house. Before we go into this segment, though, I want to talk about heating with wood, which is a winter issue. I realized today I do something nobody probably realizes you do when you heat with wood. So we heat with wood here. Well, I, in my house, heat exclusively with wood. My backup system, if I'm sick and can't feed the fire, are those plug-in radiator-looking heaters, like they circulate oil. And I also have some of the like infrared heaters that have a fan. I have one of the infrared heaters in my bedroom. On a really cold night, like below zero, I might actually run that infrared heater on top of the wood heat. But basically, the wood stove is in my living room, and my living room is warm. And as you get further from the stove, it's cooler. And then I have a series of ceiling fans to help circulate the air. Now, I could improve this system by adding some ducting and some little fans to move air from the stove to other places in the house. But basically, my house is so small, it's 1,200 square feet or less, that the heat just basically works. And early on, I used a cast iron boxwood stove that I got at Tractor Supply. And years ago, probably 6 years ago or 7 years ago, I spent $2,000 to $3,000 on a Hearthstone soapstone stove. And it weighs more than 400 pounds, but less than 500 pounds. And it has really thick stone walls that heat up. And so what happens is it burns very efficiently. It recirculates the gases that come off of the wood, and then those catch on fire too when you have a deal. So you'll see it burning from the bottom and the top because it has this circulate. It's really cool looking. And then that heats up the soapstone, and the soapstone, when the fire goes out, the soapstone radiates heat for 6 to 8 hours. The addition of this stove to my house changed it from it's cold, it's hot, it's cold, it's hot. So like vast sways in temperature to it's a lot more even. It's in probably a 8-degree range of temperature. And once you start that stove, it's going to radiate heat. This means that at this time of year, when it's cold outside and it drops in the house, I heat my house with wood. It heats up, and if it gets too hot, it's going to keep getting too hot. Now, my house is also made out of stone, and so when we heat, so this mass thing works on my house too. So my external walls are cinder block or stone. The cinder block is filled with sand to make it more of a mass. And that, when it gets cold, takes half a day really to heat back up to whatever room temperature from the inside of the house. And when I heat with wood, what happens is it takes a while for it all to catch up. Like you'll be getting cold coming back off the stone wall, which is right next to me on the video, until it heats up. And then once it heats up, it's actually easy to keep it that way. It's that heating up phase or cooling down in the summer. And have the opposite situation in the summer. It also is south facing and 12 inches thick, it was originally built with a greenhouse on the south facing wall to heat passively, solar passive heat. But I didn't know that when I bought it. So the greenhouse was gone when I got here, and someday I might address that. So all of those things play together with the wood stove. But at this time of year, because I like a warm house, I like it to be 72 to 74 degrees, winter and summer. I'm not usually cooling it down to 50 degrees like some of my friends from the north. I have a fire. It gets warm. It's warm enough outside that we're not losing a lot of heat right now. And then I let the fire go out, and I let the house get down to about 60 degrees. And if it doesn't look like it's going to warm up the next day, I have another fire. And this means in order for this to be efficient in my life, in the stove, right now, I can go with a match and light it, and there will be a fire. So I preset the stove. I don't even think about the fact that I do that. But I've had my first fire of the year. It went for a couple of days because we were below freezing at night, and I was losing enough heat to make it. And since that time, my house has, at its lowest temperature, been 66 degrees. And it's been hovering around between 66 and 72 degrees because of the sun hitting the stone on the south side of the wall without a greenhouse. And so I haven't had the heat. This is the best time of year for my heating bill. But Tonight, I think we're going to finally get below that 66-degree line. I have to look at what the temperature is overnight, and I'll probably have a fire tonight eventually. And then it takes, because it's soapstone, takes about 2 hours to heat up. So the fire will be going, it'll be warm in there. There'll be a little bit of warmth coming up it, but until that soapstone heats up, it doesn't radiate out. So people with cast iron stoves, it heats faster, but doesn't stay as long. With a soapstone or a mass-based stove, it heats up the mass, and that takes a while, and then you're warm. The other thing is I use 25% of the wood on my soapstone stove than I did on the cast iron stove. So when you're choosing a stove, all of those things are considerations. Do I want heat quickly, or do I want it to last for a long time? Do I want to feed the stove in the middle of the night, or do I want to sleep at night? Do I have a situation where it's hard to keep it up and I need, quick changes? That's going to be a cast iron stove. Do I want to cook on top of it? That's going to be a cast iron stove or a soapstone stove with a burner. Lots of things to think about. I just wanted to show that perspective because we don't talk about the wood heat very much. Maybe that should be my segment, like heating with wood. No, I can talk about it from time to time. We can do a whole show on heating with wood. It'd be kind of fun. As far as other infrastructure, the geothermal lines are in. I've talked about the water. And now we need the list of the residual things we need to get in place for gravity feed water here. And Tactical and I will be working on that this weekend so that I can source them before the workshop, because Sean Mills is going to show, he's going to show what we're doing for the gravity feed. He's also going to talk about function stacking, other ways of collecting water, not just my spring, because I have a whole roof where water could come from, which is pretty darn cool. You get a lot of water off that. And having that backup means if we have a droughty year, but I have storage, I'm in a good place. Next segment is finances. This is where we talk about the finances of the homestead. And for months, I have been telling you about money going out and not talking about money coming in. We now have our first sheep at slaughter. We will be sold out of the 3 we sell. And I do include the personal sheep we are buying with our money separate from the business. Okay, so the price you pay when you buy a lamb from me is the price we pay when we buy a lamb from me, sort of thing. Well, it's actually from us, from Tactical and me. So I do that because there are business expenses with the sheep, keeping it separate. And when I'm using it for personal use, it should come out of my personal budget from a tax perspective. And if we muddy that, and I ever have people looking, auditing me, they're going to be like, no, these don't count because you're eating those sheep. So the cleaner cut is money from the checking account buys the sheep from the company, and then that's what we eat. And then the other is separate, like they're in separate freezers. It's all separate. And that's just something to think about. You should get advice of your own bookkeepers and tax advisors for wherever you are. That was just, for me, the easiest way to track it properly. Okay. Therefore, I've tracked the finances. So the sheep were $3,000. The trailer cost $3,000. That's $6,000 in. The trailer we depreciate over 5 years. So to this year's finances, I add $400, just so you understand how that works. We bought feed and hay. And by feed, I mean fescue pellets and stuff like that, around $900. And that includes all the hay for this winter that's coming. We bought Timothy grass hay, and it was expensive this year because rain didn't happen. I paid the vet $80 for the 6 sheep who we are eating and we're not selling because he got antibiotics. Somebody asked me the other day, why are you willing to eat that and not willing to sell it? Because I promise people sheep do not have antibiotics in them and never have. However, I believe that after 2 months after that's been administered, it really has cleared from his system. So for me, I'm willing to eat it. Therefore, it's personal use. No, that is not what I'm serving at the, I am serving some lamb at the Food Forest Workshop. It won't be that one. Very clearly have that one marked and separated for personal use only. $200 in dog food for the livestock darting dogs. We did not have to buy those dogs though. So that was totally something we didn't put money in. Processing will be between $550 and $600 at the end of it all. Gas, $200. Fencing supplies also depreciated over 5 years. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not $400 on the thing. It's $600. This is $400. That's $2,000. So when I do all that and add it all up, and the two longer term depreciating things, I just took the amount of depreciation, 1/5 of the cost. The cost per animal, not including labor, is $539 among all the sheep. So that's 11. I divided by 11. And I get the value of the existing sheep still happening, having other sheep and that sort of thing. And so that means the per animal charge, which is going to be, it's between $450 and $550, I think, by the time all of the weighing and everything happens. I'll know more when we actually have the meat back and the weights for that, is right in line with our expenses including the infrastructure that's being depreciated. It does not cover labor. And that is how the finances work for this. I wanted to share that because if you're thinking of getting sheep to save money, that's the finances. It can be done cheaper though. If you have pasture and don't have to augment with stuff as much, it can be cheaper that way. If you do not have to buy infrastructure, it can be cheaper that way. Buying if you process them yourselves, it can be cheaper that way. If you don't need an LGD, it can be cheaper that way. And I guess if I already said buying the infrastructure, great. If not, if you don't have to buy the infrastructure, I think I already said that, it's cheaper that way. There are ways to keep the costs down. And next year, when I do this math for the next batch, I think it'll be cheaper because I didn't have to buy the sheep. So what I did not depreciate was that initial $3,000 input on the flock. So that's just the way the finances worked out on these. What I understand is getting good genetics in your sheep is expensive, and there's a waiting list, because I was talking to Trisha about that. She's like, yeah, everybody's talking about how they can't get good ones, and if you buy them from like Greg Judy, they're super expensive. And I said, well, we have good genetics, and I think we have a pregnant sheep, a pregnant ewe, and that may be somewhere where we interact with each other because we're community members, right? I know that Doc Barry has good genetics. He may not want to sell any of his females, but he may. You don't know. So part of that is, I think, getting to know the people who have the sheep who are doing well. For us, if I were, for example, to take one of my males and give it to Doc Barry and in trade for one of his males, that's a way to not have an inbreeding problem, right? And if we're both handling our sheep similarly and keeping them healthy, that's like a powerful trade. That's why you want to know your community members. Anyway, that's the finances of the sheep. I hope you found that one interesting. If you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in two ways. One, get your coffee at hollerroast.com. Two, consider becoming a member over at livingfreeintennessee.com. Those in the chat, there'll be a 5-second delay after this, and we'll go into Q&A. Those on the audio, you will hear the Q&A on Saturday's show. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week. All righty, guys, we're into the Q&A show, and I've got some Holler neighbors on today. I also have a list of questions from email. I've got about 8 items starred from the comments, some of which are just suggestions of what topics we can add to Friday's show instead of grow. I'm going to add some Holler neighbors in. Steve, how's it going?
There. Great. How are you?
Good. Hey,
Yes.
wait, is that TSP swag?
Oh, yes.
He's got a Val mug.
Yes,
anyway,
you need to open
like
up a
that
swag
one?
shop, Nicole. I do.
I need to open up a swag shop?
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny. I just took one off my website last week.
Really?
Because I don't like it. And so I'm going to Scramblin's here. Hi, Scramblin. I'm going to redo the swag shop. So we will have a swag shop. Anyway, let's add Tactical to the live feed too. Tactical, what's new? He has to unmute before he can answer. And he's not unmuting very quickly because I caught him off guard and asked the question way too fast. Okay, how you doing, Tactical?
Tired.
Yeah.
So, getting ready to move the girls.
Oh, really? Right now? This second?
Well, not this second, but I just got the wire up, so I got to string a little temporary thing across the driveway, and then, I don't know, I might move them while we're still on. We'll see.
Awesome. Okay, well, everybody's doing well. Did you guys have fun last night at dinner?
Had a blast. Yes. Thank you.
I had too much fun and I stayed up too late.
Yeah.
That's what I did. But it was kind of nice to have that. I haven't had, like we used to do that with Jenny, and then she left, and then there was like chaos getting ready for all these events we did all summer. And I was like, it's just nice to have a normal holler neighbor dinner for once and just hang out and talk about whatever we want to talk about. Okay, so I've got questions from email and I've got questions in the comments. I'm going to just go one at a time. Guys, if you want to ask questions, put the first couple words in all caps and I'll do my best to work them in. The first one is for Tactical, and it came from Telegram, and I can't, oh yeah, there it is. It's about using an old mother to make vinegar. I found an old bottle of ACV, apple cider vinegar, for those among us who don't know what ACV is. It was full of a gelatinous raft mother. Does anybody know how to make a new batch of vinegar using this? So Tactical, how do you make vinegar?
So this is something that I started to do and have not actually finished, but I did go through all of the research with it. And the simple version is your fruit is going to have fructose, so a sugar. To make that into a cider or a mead, you will convert that sugar into an alcohol, and then to make it into a vinegar, you convert the alcohol into an acid. So you make cider or mead, and then you make vinegar. So in theory, as far as I know, like, it's a common practice apparently that a lot of people will just use vinegar with the mother as their, I don't know, I'm blanking on the word, bacteria, their additive to convert the alcohol to acid.
Yeah.
They will just use apple cider vinegar or regular vinegar with the mother to get that into whatever it is that they made. And there's actually some people will do a lot of different types of vinegar. So not just apple or regular vinegar. People will make plum vinegar and peach vinegar and basically any type of fruit or anything. They can, convert that into a vinegar.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about this last night. Mute yourself, please, because of the bounce sound, please. We talked about this last night, and I'm like, you're going to have to answer this question because you've done all the research on vinegar. I've never made vinegar. I've fermented cider. I can do that part, and I've distilled fuel, but I have not made vinegar. And then I was like, well, now we have to do a winter vinegar project. So I think we'll probably start, like, Steve, you can come help too. We're going to try to figure out how to make vinegar and maybe try it for the first time, because I think that would be a fun winter project in the holler.
Absolutely. We'd love to.
Yeah. Okay. Next, we have Claiming Liberty in comment on how to tell if your sheep are pregnant. Says stethoscope to listen for the lambs. Tactical, do you think we could catch the lamb and hold her long enough to get stethoscope her? I do have a stethoscope because I use it in my beekeeping.
We could probably do that. And I was going to say, my dad's about to make a pass through, and I know he has a stethoscope.
Yeah, I mean, I have one here. But we could try that. The question is, can we catch the ewe and get her to sit still long enough? That'll be the trick. And she's pregnant, I think, so I don't want to be throwing her around too much. But whatever. Okay, this next one comes from online. It's from Eden. I have a question for the Q&A show. A few Wednesday episodes back, Jack mentioned not having to plant like trees with each other in an orchard. So it doesn't have to be all apple, all peach, all cherry, and just plant an early and late crabapple amongst them. Can you please explain why the crabapple? Is this for pollination purposes or what? Okay, who wants to take this question? Anyone?
I'm not.
I'll take it, but I'm giving you guys a chance.
Are they asking why to plant a crabapple?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, so two things. One, why not just plant all one kind of tree? Because diversity of trees near each other adds strength to the food forest. because you won't, if you have like all one kind of peach tree in an area, for example, it can lead to pest pressure because they're attracted to that. If you have a variety of things, you're less likely to attract as many pests because there's a diversity of what they want to eat there. And it's not like this is the mother lode of peach pest pressure location. So that's the first part of that. As far as why to plant the crabapple, I don't know, actually. But Nick Ferguson also says that at my food forest class, I'm going to ask this question and we'll have to circle back on it. I do know that like one of the reasons he told me to put crab apples in mine is that livestock like to eat crab apples. But I don't know if there's a disease prevention or a pest prevention. And when you don't know the answer to something, it's better not to make it up. So I was hoping one of these two knew, but we'll get back to you on that after the food forest class at the end of the month, where we're now all going to ask Nick, why are we putting crab apple? In fact, anybody who has a crab apple available, I want to source one. The only ones I can find are ornamental crab apples at Lowe's. And I remember crab apples being, the size of a really large grape. And they put out crab apples the size of a pea. And I'd rather have the grape ones because I actually like crab apples because I'm a weirdo.
I will add one thing on that with planting diversity. Look up Mother Tree with Suzanne Simard. I think it's Simard. She is up in Canada, and she started doing research into some forestry stuff because they were basically trying to monocrop trees and had a lot of problems, and figured out that all of their problems were related to the fact that they were trying to monocrop a tree. They needed the diversity, and a lot of the work that she's done, she's figured out that the whole internet of trees, they will not only communicate with each other, but they will pass resources to each other, and they will prioritize their own species over the other species. They can also prioritize their own kin. So they knew which trees are their offspring.
Wow.
So that's something else you can look up. I like listening to her talk about all of that. But it's one more reason that every time that we think that we've got a genius idea like monocropping, it usually doesn't work very well.
We're not the geniuses we think we are, according to Tactical Redneck. Okay, this next one came from Telegram, and I don't remember who asked it, and I don't have the exact words. I am going to bring Testimona on to answer it. And if you don't want to hear the F word, when I bring Testimona on, she says the F word, I think 4 times. So, cover your ears, because I didn't want to edit what she had to say. Somebody asked, hey, I know Nicole has dealt with anxiety attacks. Has anybody addressed depression? And I had meant to address this on today's Q&A with my own thoughts. And then yesterday, Testimona put something out for everybody who's feeling depression. And she recorded
turn this into a series.
So she put it on TikTok. And I said, hey, can I play that on the podcast? So it was actually a really good talk. This is not the only answer for addressing depression, but I think it's a really good insight into living with depression and ways to handle it. So I'm going to play this, guys, in the chat. I've never played a video this way on StreamYard. So if like the audio isn't working, definitely speak up and let me know. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Testimona, who will say the F word.
I may turn this into a series of why it's so important to have a circle of solid women in your life, especially if you are one. But let me just share something with you real quick. So I've been going through some shit, and I am somebody who used to be pretty vocal about it when I did, because that's how I was taught to survive, right, when I got into recovery. However, I stopped, and I was like, fuck that. No one needs to know shit. I'm going to handle all my stuff on my own, whatever. Okay. Well, first off, that can, lead you down some bad paths, like winding up in jail because you blew up on somebody. So Wouldn't recommend, but we learn. So I was talking with a group of women last night about a situation I'm currently going through that is so challenging and heartbreaking and, grief conjuring, whatever you want to say, that it's the type of situation that you wake up every single day feeling like you're physically dying or feeling like you're waking up in a panic, and that feeling just doesn't leave you. And you just go about your day regardless and do what you need to do for yourself. But it's after a couple months of dealing with that every fucking day, it wears on you. So I was talking to them and I was like, this is bullshit. Like, I don't want to be dealing with this anymore. I have a lot going on right now. I need to be functioning at a level like way up here, but with how bogged down my mind feels, I'm way down there, and like I shouldn't be there. And it was all this I shouldn't, I need, blah, blah, blah. And I was talking to one of the women this morning, and she was like, you need to be exactly where the fuck you are. And sometimes that shit's not pretty. But what you need to do is what you're doing, which is being real about it and not just fucking talking the talk and acting like everything's fine. If you're way the fuck down there and you're judging your experience, you're going to keep yourself down there. You're not going to be able to come back up. So accept yourself for where you're at and like let the process happen. Let the emotions process and digest and move through you, because when we talk about depression is a symptom of when emotions aren't being allowed to move through us and process. And so we get stuck and slow and apathetic and depressed, right? And so that's what will go on. And I was just like, oh, holy shit. Because I will beat the hell out of myself if I'm not, operating at maximum capacity and doing 50 different fucking things perfectly, which is really not super realistic for, kind of anybody. But you can get a lot closer to that when, you don't feel like your life and heart is falling apart. But when you are in that situation, she's like, you need to be able to show yourself a little more compassion. And she asked me a question. I'll leave you with this. She said, show yourself the same compassion that you would show me if I called you in your situation and I was falling apart. And I thought about that. And the question I have to ask myself is, how would I treat someone else who was in my situation and was calling me and was going through what I'm going through? And I already know the answer to that. Like, there's no fucking way I would talk to them the way that I talk to myself. There is no way in hell. Even someone I didn't like, I wouldn't talk to them the way that I talk to myself. And it's that judgment, that self-judgment that will keep us stuck in whatever we're going through. Some people have different opinions. Do what works for you. But for those of you who feel stuck and are, going through heartbreak and feel like your life is on fire, and feel like you should be so much better than you are, that might be true. Like, it might be something to look at of like, yo, I don't want my mind to be here. I want it to be there. Great. Recognize that and aim for that. But also, I think there is a way to get through this without judging the fuck out of ourselves. And some of us need to just learn how to put down the bat and let our body process what we have been going through. Because trauma is stored in the body. And if we're constantly jamming it up and denying it, that leads to decay, it leads to depression, and it can lead to a hell of a lot worse than that as well. And I thank God today for the women that are in my life that can drop those truth bombs on me when I need to be reminded of it most. I hope this helps anybody else who is really hurting right now. You are absolutely not alone. And there's nothing fucking wrong with you. We're going to get through this.
All right. I just sometimes you end up with things falling in your lap where one person asks a question and somebody else answers it in our community where it's timely. And I thought that was a really good answer to the depression question. And I'm seeing here, Two Old Crows Homestead says, this is so true. Randy and I used to be in foster care, and it was all about medicating kids to keep them controllable instead of working through stuff. And then Claiming Liberty says, Jordan Peterson and Dr. Huberman from Huberman Lab podcast released a podcast yesterday that's very relevant to this topic. And I'm saying that on this in case the person who asked that depression question wants to reach out. The other thing I know, when a friend of yours is depressed, I have one right now who's going through some stuff. Sometimes just offering to be by their side through something is really helpful. And by which I mean, sometimes when we're depressed, we need to reach out for help. And it may mean a psychologist. It may mean going to an Al-Anon meeting. It may mean, addressing an addiction problem in AA or some other way. But the step from I know I need to do this to getting in the car and going to the meeting or picking up the phone and making the call is too hard. And logically from the outside, it's not really too hard, right? But it is too hard for that person in that moment. And the thing you can do to help is say, would you like me to make that call for you? Would you like me to come with you to an Al-Anon meeting? Would you like me to drive you to a psychology meeting or whatever it is? Would you like me to help you address this issue and stand by your side because it's too hard? That can make a huge difference to friends in your life. So I know it's a very serious topic, but I've seen a lot of depression. And I think if we don't take care of ourselves mentally, that's a prepper issue. We won't get through it. We won't get through the hard stuff if we're not strong inside ourselves emotionally and mentally. Okay, and now for something completely different that Holler Neighbors are going to help with. This question comes from Michelle, and basically, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's an email. I currently live in New York. I'm evaluating moving to other states with more personal, medical, and financial freedoms. Tennessee is on my list of potential areas. In your experience, does Tennessee seem to have a strong culture of freedom and community? How has your experience been over the past few years? And I'm going to hand this to Stephen first. I think you're this way. Stephen first to answer. Let Tactical give his opinion, and then I will give mine.
So I guess in a nutshell, what was the question? I mean, how was it?
So
different?
The person wants to move to Tennessee for personal, medical, and financial freedom. How do you think Tennessee rates as a possible state coming from New York, Tennessee versus Texas versus Florida versus Idaho?
Well, we're new to Tennessee. We came here 3 years ago from Florida. And, I would say they're very comparable as far as freedoms, as far as, well, with medical, I'm a veteran, so I just typically go to the VA. So, that's pretty much the same no matter, what state that we're in. Not the best, but yeah, I mean, that's, I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. I couldn't imagine being, more restricted since, I do feel so free and have, whether in Florida or here. So yeah, not the best answer, but, I guess I don't have nothing else to really compare it to.
Okay. That's fair enough. I mean, they're asking for your on the ground impressions. So
right.
I'm going to have a different one than they do. Tactical, what's yours?
So from my adult life, this is the longest that I've lived in one place. Like literally. This is I spent 17 years in the military. Every 2 to 3 years, sometimes every year, I was moving, and it was always to a different state. So I've been in California, Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina, Maine. Like, I've been all over the place. And here, I live in the middle of nowhere. So there's that aspect, but like all the stuff you hear about, like, well, they're going to take your chickens. Who's going to take my chickens away? I've never seen anybody here that wasn't looking for here because we were having an event or something. Like, I've seen the county sheriff show up here once because a dude got into a fight and fled the scene and came this direction, so the sheriff's deputy was looking for him. Like, that's it. Nobody's coming around here, like, hassling us over the fact that we've got livestock or the fact that whatever. Like even
There's a pile of crap in front of my house right now, which there is.
yeah,
It looks
like
messy.
even the electrical inspectors that have come out because new service getting put in, they come out, they look at it, they make sure that the connection is going to be safe, and then they go away. Like they don't care what we do with it once it's hooked up. They come out to make sure that when it gets hooked up, it's safe. What happens after that is not their problem. So I love Tennessee for that aspect, unlike California, which was like you can't mow your grass before 10 a.m. Like that was a legitimate law in California. You're not allowed to mow your grass before 10 a.m. I'm not really sure who came up with that number, but anyway, as far as like all of the places that I've been, even I'd say probably North Carolina was the second closest, but even it had its own issues. And I think the only other thing I'll throw in is doesn't matter which state it is, if you want something that looks like New York or California, find the right city and it'll probably be like that. So if you want to avoid that, stay out of the city, because there's like 6 counties here in Tennessee that you got to get smog for your vehicle, just like California. And guess where they all are? Nashville.
I think they turned that off, didn't they?
I have not heard that they turned that off.
I thought we got rid of that. Yeah. Anyway, so my perspective coming from Oregon, which is not terribly free anymore, is an urban-rural perspective and a choice perspective. So part of the question is there a lot of freedom-oriented community here? Yes. Is there a lot of freedom-oriented community in New York? Yes. Is there a lot of freedom-oriented community in Maine? Yes. There's a lot of freedom-oriented communities everywhere, even in places where you're feeling like your freedoms are inhibited. It's up to you to find it and build it and connect with it. And if you're not doing that in New York, you probably won't do it here. So start doing that in New York before you move, because there are a lot of freedom-oriented people. And I had stereotypes about Maine not being very freedom-oriented. And then I traveled to Maine this summer and I met a lot of freedom-oriented people who just wanted to grow their food and sell it. That's what I found there. And it was a good wake-up call for me, because I've been stereotyping other states based on what I hear in the media. And we all know we can't believe the media. So first of all, it's up to you to find the freedom-oriented communities. Secondly, I would look at regulatory environments for the 3 things you mentioned: financial freedom, medical freedom, and I can't remember what the other one was, but I think it was just personal freedom. And evaluate which parts of any state are going to have more freedom. You can also look at how the governors reacted during the 2020, 2021 COVID shutdowns and see at the state level, is the state leadership willing to stand up against federal pushes? And we all know which states did that best. Tennessee is on the list, but we're not as good as Texas. But our governor basically threw it to the local municipalities on any of the mandates. And that was better than just mandating things at the state level. So I'm comfortable here from a freedom perspective. I won't say we're the best one in the country, though. I would love it if we would be. So please move here and bring your freedom ideals here so that we can continue to be freedom oriented. Because that's the other thing, is the more freedom oriented people move here, the better we are. Okay, I'm going back to online questions. Is there a reason you chose PEX over PVC for water lines? Oh, yeah, there is a big reason I did. When Tactical said we're doing PEX, my only question is, why aren't we doing that black poly pipe? Because PVC, when it ages, becomes horribly brittle and breaks. And so if you're putting that in the ground, what happens to pipes in the ground is there's a little bit of dirt churn. Rocks can come up and hit that because your soil is living. And then when they become brittle over time, they break. So PEX is less likely to break. That's why I like PEX. Tactical, do you have anything to add to that?
I hate running PEX but once it's there, it's there. And like with the same with the poly pipe, it's cheaper. But one thing with poly pipe is if a rock presses up against it, it can puncture the pipe. I don't know if you've ever been to Nicole's property, but there are several rocks here.
One or two.
So that's why I do not like the only thing I would use the poly pipe for here is to put the PEX inside the poly pipe just for additional protection. And
Cool.
as far as running it, I kind of would have preferred to run PVC just because it would have been easier. But like she said, it's a lot less prone to breaking because it does get brittle. And we actually did break a piece of conduit with the backhoe that I knew the conduit was there.
Somewhere.
Well, no, I knew exactly where it was. But it made a slight bend. He pushed up against it and it just shattered. Whereas there was a 3/4 inch line that goes from the pump house up to the cabin. I followed that a good 30, 40 feet with the backhoe and just reused the same line because it didn't hurt it. I was able to literally dig it up with a backhoe.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Next question comes from email. This is from Marie, who is flying down here to look at property. And I'm hoping we can crowdsource this for Marie. Wants to know, do you know any trusted realtors who specialize in homesteading or tips about this? Feel free to contact me directly, which I will. Guys, do you know any good real estate agents for somebody coming from out of the area to find farming, homesteading, fertile land for purchase? And I know that Dana's wife does real estate stuff out of Camden, and I think we have a couple people in East Tennessee. If you know anybody, throw it in the comments or email me, Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com. The way I find homesteads is by looking at them and not depending on the real estate agent for that function. So I'll go on the MLS or drive around and look and then make my own assessment of the land. So I'm not the best resource for this. I'm hoping y'all who have been looking for land I know, Stephen, have you found anybody? Because you're looking for a homestead, aren't you?
Yes, and the realtor that I've been using for a couple of years. I mean, he's wonderful, but he doesn't concentrate on those types of properties. I mean, it's pretty much anything, but yeah, he's a wonderful realtor, and I'd continue using him. But yeah, he's not specialized in certain things.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I would say is go on Facebook to the Homesteaders of Middle Tennessee group and ask there, because there are some real estate agents there who specialize, who are homesteaders. So they've thought about it. And that's, if you are in Tennessee, even not in Middle Tennessee, that's a great resource for homesteading in general. Lots of best practices shared, events promoted, and all sorts of connections are made on the Homesteaders of Middle Tennessee group on Facebook. The thing we don't like to use, but we still use it, because that is what it is. Okay. I'm not getting a lot of questions from comments, guys. I have one more from email and one more from comments. So just if you want anything before we wrap up, you should get that in there now. I'm saying it now because there's always a delay between comments and now. This next one comes from Christy. And this is, I was wondering if you knew anyone near Jackson, Tennessee with sheep who wanted to perhaps have weekly help on the farm. Dawn told me you have sheep. So if you're around there, I'd love to help you. Okay. So this is somebody who was at Self-Reliance Festival. She wants to learn about sheep. And the question is, are you anywhere reasonable to Jackson, Tennessee? And do you perhaps need an intern to come in once a week who trades labor for learning how to raise sheep? Christy, we do a homesteading boot camp here, so we could talk about that, but I'm nowhere near Jackson. You're talking about a 3-hour drive to here, and we can show you what we do with our sheep. I know Dr. Barry has sheep, but I don't know if he has availability for that. And there are other people with sheep out there. So I would say, again, people listening to this, if you are interested in connecting with Christy, reach out to me. I would say to Christy and everybody else, it's a really good idea to get on our MeWe group, Living Free in Tennessee, and also on the Telegram group, Living Free in Tennessee, as well as Self-Reliance Festival, and start asking these questions of each other. Because I'm pretty sure if you start asking, you will find people who have sheep who I don't even know listen to me and have sheep, who probably could tell me more than just the stethoscope, find out if that sheep is pregnant. Totally going to try that this afternoon. Funny video to follow. Anyway, I don't have any other. Oh, wait, I have one more question queued up from chat. This is from Grace. Are there any chain restaurants that serve good lamb? I've thought about raising them, but I've never had it prepared in a way I like. And for me, this is hard to answer because some people say they don't like lamb and they've had it at a restaurant. It wasn't very good. The other thing is I raise hair sheep, not wool sheep. Hair sheep have a different meat flavor than wool sheep. Wool sheep have a stronger lamb flavor, but it just tastes like lamb to me. I cook it like I would cook beef. And if there's a strong flavor because the animal was too old, which often the commercial sheep is, then there's a stronger lamb flavor and I like it. And it's the only reason I think maybe I didn't like it at first, or it was weird at first, is I hadn't had lamb. And so I wasn't used to the flavor. Same goes for venison, right? Once you try venison for the first time, if you put aside your association with beef, it's actually pretty tasty. But if you expect it to taste like beef, it won't. That said, lamb raised on pasture, fresh, cooked well is delicious. Garlic and rosemary is a great complement if you're worried about the lamb flavor, but I like it with just like a little bit of garlic, salt, pepper, and I'm happy. So that's what I know. I don't know of any specific chains. A higher end fine dining restaurant rack of lamb or lamb chops is going to give you lamb that's cooked well. And if you're getting it at somewhere like, what's that Italian place that people all go to? A chain restaurant. I can't think of a name of any because I just don't even go out to eat anymore. If you're getting it at sort of a lower end Ruby Tuesday sort of place, it's probably not going to be as good. You might get lucky. You might not. I don't even know if they have lamb on the menu, right? You got anything to add to that, Steve?
No, I don't. I've only had lamb a couple times, you know, like at those big all you can eat meat places. So yeah, I'm very interested in finding ways to cook my lamb once I get it, and so I guess I'll be leaning on you for that. So.
Oh, we should do some YouTube series on how to cook lamb.
Yes.
Yeah. K-Bonk says don't overcook it. That's true. You cook it like literally cook it like beef. If you overcook it, it gets tough and chewy because it's a very lean meat, and then it's gross. Sheep or goats on the floor? Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick about the realtor thing. I did meet a realtor by the name of Tim at Carrie Brown's swap meet. Really cool guy, lives in East Tennessee, I think closer to Johnson City, but I think he serves that whole area, and he is a homesteader. Super awesome guy, but I don't know his last name. I was just looking for it, and but you know, Carrie Brown would know.
Yeah, reach out to Carrie Brown on the real estate agent. That is strongrootresources.com if you do not know who Carrie Brown is. And that person I think is in the East Tennessee Freedom Cell as well. So maybe try to find them because I've seen them on the LFTN Freedom Cell posting. I just didn't remember their name and couldn't find it. Okay, last question of today's show. Sheep or goats on a Florida homestead? Steven, what do you think I'm going to say?
No goats.
Nope, that's not what I'm going to say.
Really?
It depends.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yes, I love my goats. Actually, we have them trained to electric wire, so we'll probably start rotating. And the reason he was saying no goats is he has watched me and probably listened to me complain about goats getting out all the time. So that is true. They're frustrating. And sheep get out less, but sheep still get out. But it depends on what your goal is. And so I don't know what your place looks like. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. I brought goats in here with the original intention of clearing. Like I had bramble thicket taller than I was starting behind my house, going all the way back into the forest. And we put goats on that and they ate it. and they did a good job. Now, sheep can help you with that too. Goats will eat more of that kind of thing than sheep. And that's why I had goats. Maybe you want goat's milk. Well, then you should have goats, because maybe you don't want sheep milk. It's harder to milk a sheep from what I understand. And so like, what do you want to do? Do you like goat meat? Then raise goats. Do you like sheep meat? Then raise sheep. I really am digging the sheep, and I never bred my goats. And now I have pet goats because I like them, because I made them super friendly, except for the one who isn't. And because they've been trained on electric wire, I'm not having to make an uncomfortable choice with my pet goat. So she can now be rotated, and she will eat the things. And that's helpful because she will eat things sheep won't. So why not both? I don't know. It's more management with both. That's all I got on that, guys. Thanks for joining in the Q&A show today. Remember, if you want to get a question in for this, either show up live and put it in all caps, or go to livingfreeintennessee.com, click on contact, fill out that form, and just tell me about your question. We'll work it into next week. And with that, guys, go out, make it a great week.